I think if you love cars, you love the Defender. We have a Defender, and my wife, she's had a Defender in one version or other since she was 18 years old, since she started driving. And our kids even learn how to drive on a Defender. They learn how to drive on the desert in Kuwait because not only is Defender, of course, great highway driving, but you could drive it. It's great for off-roading. You could drive it on the desert. And that was the place where my kids learned how to drive a car. That's why the Defender is the vehicle that's basically adapted for the city, but also for beyond. The Defender 90 is the original two-door Defender body design. It's a smaller silhouette, but fits for journeys of all size. There's 3D surround cameras with clear sight ground view, so it lets you see underneath the vehicle and anticipate obstacles and rough terrain. Again, for the urban city and beyond. There's a next-gen Pivi Pro infotainment system, which of course is great for 3 kids driving in the back seat, and intuitive driver displays that are customizable to your journey. Explore the Defender 90 at LandRoverUSA.com. Thank you so much for listening to this How to Write and Publish Your First Book in the Next 30 Days. I will tell you that writing books has created so many wonderful benefits for me, including joining the community of other writers, many of whom became great friends eventually. Also, so many business opportunities and even personal benefits. Like, I'll tell you this story later, but how I met my wife because I was a book writer. So before we get into the meat and specifics of writing and publishing and writing your first book, I want to tell you a little bit more about the many reasons are why you should write a book right now in today's day and age.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
There are a lot of writing courses out there that are about how to write a book, how to write a novel, how to write a viral blog post, et cetera, et cetera. And yet I would notice the instructors of these courses, and all credit to them, all credit to anybody who tries to help people write better. But the instructors often hadn't written their first book, or they hadn't written a truly viral article or blog post or whatever. So I wanted to make this to, again, help people write and publish their first book and hopefully begin a successful writing career. I've written 25 books. Some of them were very successful bestsellers. Some of them not so good, but we'll ignore those for now. I've written nonfiction, fiction. I've even written a comic book, and I've written, for better or for worse, many viral articles that have created a lot of opinion and controversy. I'm embarrassed to admit about what my initial reasons were for wanting to write a book. It was many years ago. I was 20, 21 years old, and I was very insecure. I honestly thought nobody would like me unless I was already successful. I thought nobody would want to be my friend. I thought I wouldn't have a job. So I wanted to write a book. So the book would almost precede me before anyone met me. But there are many actual important reasons to write a book. One is people are more likely to learn who you are if you've written a book. I don't remember who's written my favorite blog posts, but I always remember who my favorite authors are. Another thing is, if you're in business and you're trying to get a consulting gig or a speaking engagement, the person who's written a book is more likely to get the gig than the person who hasn't written a book. Also, books have a longer lifespan than blog posts. I keep books on my bookshelf. I don't keep blog posts on my bookshelf. And in a digital world, it's good sometimes to be able to say, here, I've made this. This is something physical. You could see, oh, it's by James Altucher. It's a physical book. That makes me feel proud. We can't ignore the fact that you might make money writing books. That's an important reason. Also, sometimes when I write a book, I think my great-great-great-great-grandchildren might one day read this book. Now, of course, they can read a blog post or your emails or whatever, but these are my curated thoughts about who I am and what I stand for. A book is really like the new business card. Doesn't have just your email or phone number, but like, again, this is me. This is what I'm about and what I know about and what I feel I'm an expert in. And let's be honest, it's fun to entertain people with stories. And we're going to talk a lot about this, but a book is a way to entertain. You're an entertainer once you're a writer. And perhaps most importantly, your first book might lead to your second book, your third book, and a whole career in writing. Before you even touch the keyboard and begin that writing, there's a couple of things we need to talk about and think about so you can even begin the process of writing a book. The first is asking the questions, who are you? Why are you? Why now? And I'll cover that in the very next chapter in this module. The second is, what are myths that are common about writing that will actually hurt you in the process of writing your book? And then finally, time management is incredibly important for writing. And we'll talk about that very briefly, but it's important to be able to think about that before you start writing your first book. Many of you might have read the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And the concept in his book is, for everything you do, whether it's starting a business, writing a book, even beginning a relationship, why are you doing this? Why is this important to you? And another book that is worth reading on this topic is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl was a prisoner in Auschwitz during World War II. And in order to survive every day, he needed to find meaning in his life. Like maybe the meaning in his life that kept him going was one day he would see his wife again. Or maybe another day, the meaning that kept him going was one day he would write about this and let people know what was happening. So whether it's your search for why or your search for meaning, it's very important to have a kind of fundamental basis for why it is you're writing something. Now, I like that Start With Why, and I like the book Man's Search for Meaning. I highly recommend these books, but I've expanded this a little further. This is what I ask myself when I'm starting any project. And again, it could be a book, it could be a business, it could be a meeting I need to go to, anything, no matter how big or small. And here's the 3 questions I ask. Who are you? Why are you? Why now? So for instance, when I wrote the book Choose Yourself, which was about how a time when I went completely broke and how I was really depressed and even suicidal, and how I overcame these feelings in order to try to succeed again and eventually to succeed again. At that time, let's say if I were to ask myself, who are you? Why are you? Why now? I would say, who am I? Well, I'm someone who went broke, who lost millions of dollars after being an entrepreneur and selling a business. And that happened to me more than once. And I also was a writer. I'd written several books by that point. Why are you? Well, I'm someone who likes to explain things and teach and coach and help people. And then I had to answer the question, why now? Well, this was a few years after the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and many people had gone broke. Many people had gone through similar things to me, but they were afraid to talk about them. There was shame associated with going broke and failing in a business and so on. So I felt it was important right then and there to tell my story and help people. And because I was able to answer very clearly those questions, who are you? Why are you? Why now? That really drove the success of that book. And again, these questions apply to anything you do. Let's talk about me making this writing course. Who am I? Someone who's written 25 books and written for many publications and so on. Why are you? Again, I'm someone who likes to explain and teach, particularly where I think there are gaps. There's nobody else doing a writing course specifically like this that's getting to be very specific advice and showing you how to write and publish your first book. So that's the why are you. And why now? Hopefully we won't, but we might be entering a recession and we've been having some economic hard times. More people than ever are writing books. And I want you to write the best possible first book and perhaps launch a writing career or get other benefits for writing a book. And we talked about those benefits in the last section. So that's my who are you, why now for making this course. Think for a moment about your answers to these questions. Who are you, why now? Maybe you're retired and you have had a lot of interesting life experiences. And, maybe the why are you is you want your great-great-grandchildren or your friends or people who don't know you, maybe your ex-coworkers or readers in general, to know about your experiences. And the why now, maybe you feel at this point in your life, you're switching from ambition to mentorship. And it's really important for you to get these messages out. So that could be the answers to your questions. But always think about this. Again, who are you? Why are you? Why now? Next, we're going to talk about a lot of the myths about writing, myths that I want to talk to you about so that they don't add to your worries and they don't rent up real estate in your brain while you're writing your book. There's a lot of myths about writing that could hurt your writing if you pay too much attention to them. First one, and it's going to sound unusual, the first one is to think too much about quality. Now, I'm not saying write a bad book. I'm saying there are two important things about quality you should avoid. One is you're only writing right now a first draft. The important thing of a first draft is to type. That's literally the main skill you need. It's typing and storytelling. I'm going to show you how to edit a first draft and make a second draft, third draft, and make it as perfect as you possibly can. But quality is the last thing on your mind when you're writing that first draft. First, you're getting all the ideas on the page. You're getting all the stories on the page. Then you'll figure it out. Length. A lot of people, this is a big myth. A lot of people think, oh, I've got to write 60,000 words. I've got to write 250 pages. I don't know why that became the common size of a book with traditional publishing, but I'll give you an example. I have one friend, Kamal Ravikant. He wrote a best-selling book that sold millions of copies. It's called Love Yourself as If Your Life Depended on It. And I think it was like 20 or 30 pages, maybe even less. He sold millions of copies. When you publish a book now, if you're not using traditional publishing, and we're going to talk about that eventually, self-publishing versus traditional publishing, but if you're self-publishing, and paperback, hardcover, audiobook, Kindle, you do not have to worry about the length. So do not think about that. Put it out of your head. Another myth, intros. When you're starting a chapter, start in the middle. You don't have to start with the intro. You could figure out the introduction later. That concludes the intro of the book and the intro of each chapter. And I will teach you how to write a great intro, the best intro possible. But let's say you're writing a chapter on the 10 ways to be happy. Okay, just make your list. Write the 10 ways to be happy. Oh, you've got a story about one of them? Write your story. Later on, we'll figure out the intro. So start in the middle is the advice there. Chapter order. The last book I wrote, Skip the Line, which is right here. I wrote the book and submitted it to the publisher. And she was like, well, does this chapter belong here? Does this chapter belong there? And she was right. So I completely rearranged the chapters of the book. Again, your goal in the first draft is just to get as much material. You're just vomiting words onto the manuscript. So get the words out there. We'll figure out chapter order later. Expertise. This is a huge myth that you have to concern yourself. A lot of people say, well, I can't write about flowers. I don't know anything about botany. I don't have a PhD in botany. Your job as a writer is to tell stories and to tell stories that are impactful and are unique and are able to express an idea in a unique way. Your job is not to be a botanist or a PhD in anything. If you read academic papers, guess what? They're unreadable. Sometimes the smarter people are, or the more degrees they have, the worse of a writer they are. Your job is to tell stories simply and uniquely and in an understandable way, not to be an expert, because you could research the expertise. Huge myth, grammar. I have the worst grammar of anyone, and I never think about grammar. If something sounds good to my ears, then I put it in regardless of grammar. And particularly in the first draft, again, don't look backwards. Just keep typing forwards. Your job is to get as many ideas onto the page as possible. Do not even once think about grammar on the first draft. So that's the myths. Next, we're going to talk about something incredibly important for writing that many writers don't even consider, which is time management. But let me ask you a question. When are you going to write this book? When during the day are you going to write this book? Just think about it. What time during the day? And the reason I'm asking this is because your day is already full. Yesterday, for instance, you spent 24 hours doing things. You're going to have to change something in what you do every day to have the time to write. Whether you need an hour a day, a half hour a day, 2 hours a day, I don't know. That's up to you. But where does that hour come from? I have one friend, he would commute an hour every day to work and an hour back. He said to me, I saw everybody reading the New York Post or sleeping, taking a nap. And I felt like this is when I should be writing my first novel. So he did. He wrote a page on the way to work and he wrote a page on the way back. And within a few months, he had finished his first of 4 murder mysteries. And so think to yourself, maybe even audit your time. What do you do every step of the day? Audit your time for the past week or for the next week and ask yourself, do I wake up a little early? Do I not go to lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays with my colleagues? Think of the time where you could spend at least 45 minutes to an hour every day writing. Hopefully a little bit more, but don't worry so much about that. The important thing is to be consistent. You don't have to write the same time each day, but I would recommend that. Again, think about what time of each day can you change in your schedule so that you write. And if you can't think of that, go back to the questions. Who are you? Why are you? Why now? And make sure that now is really the time for you to be writing a book. So, because if you can't answer these questions, you probably have better things to do with your life than writing a book. But if you can answer those questions, then I'm sure you can find the time to start writing. Now, next are all about the craft and art of writing and storytelling. This episode of the James Altucher Show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Listen, as many of you know, I have gone broke. I've been depressed. All sorts of things have happened to me. And therapy has literally saved my life. And sometimes, though, it's expensive. It's expensive either in money or in time, but your mental health is worth it. But that's why with BetterHelp online therapy, you can save on average up to 50% per session. Like, your mental health is worth it. And with over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, and it's helped over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is completely worth it. So visit betterhelp.com/James to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/James.
Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences, like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code LISTEN50 for 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code LISTEN50.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
The core of every story is something called the arc of the hero. Every great story ever written, whether it's the Bible or Star Wars or the story of Spider-Man or The Matrix, or even the story of your own life, every great story has the arc of the hero. And I'm going to describe the different components of the arc of the hero, what makes a great arc, what makes a great story. And I want you to think about your own life and how the arc of the hero might apply. And then in the section after this, I'm going to give more examples. But the first part of the arc of the hero in the beginning of a story is the call to action. So I'll give an example from my own life. At one point, I went broke. I owned a house. I had kids. I had a family. I had just sold a business, and I just went completely broke. And I was depressed and suicidal. but I had to make money because I didn't know how to live. I had already sold my company. That's the only thing I had worked on, and I lost all my money. So the call to action was losing all of my money. Then the second part of the arc of the hero is the reluctant hero. I thought I was retired already. I didn't want to have to make more money or build another business. I was a reluctant hero. The second part of every story of the arc of the hero is the reluctant hero. And I will give, again, more examples in the next section. The third component is the inciting incident. There's something happens that forces one to go on the journey. So for instance, in the story of Spider-Man, if you remember it, his Uncle Ben dies and Spider-Man decides to go from just using his powers for money to being a superhero. That's the inciting incident. For me, it was losing my home. I literally had to make money or I'd be homeless. That was an inciting incident. The fourth component of the arc of the hero is the journey where you make friends and enemies and start to encounter problems. So for me, I had to move to another part of the world. I had to meet people who would make new friends who would help me make money and survive. And I had enemies because whenever you try to start a business or build a fortune, there are going to be people who are trying to stop you. The next component is that your problems get bigger and bigger and bigger. And along the way, you meet more friends and more enemies until you meet the greatest enemies of all. And sometimes those enemies are yourself. Sometimes you're filled with self-doubt or self-loathing or depression. And sometimes the enemies are other people who are trying to stop you. And of course, in every movie and the Bible and every story you could think of, the enemies get greater and greater until finally the next part of the arc of the hero is the greatest problem of all, whether it's destroying the Death Star or Moses leading the Jews to Israel or, Spider-Man fighting Thanos in the Avengers or whatever. The next component is this great problem that basically is the climax of the movie. And then finally, it's being able to solve the problem and then you come back to tell the tale. So for instance, for me, I overcame my depression. I was able to build another business. I was able to start writing and really satisfy many of my life's dreams. And I wrote a book summarizing the tale. So again, to summarize the arc of the hero, there's the call to action, but there's a reluctant hero. But then there's an inciting incident that pushes that hero along. Then you go on a journey and you meet friends and enemies and they get greater and greater. The problems you encounter get greater and greater until finally you have the greatest problem of it all. And then you solve it and then you return to tell the tale. So remember that formula and we're going to look at some specific examples. Think of the movie Star Wars. Even if you haven't seen Star Wars, and many people, of course, have seen Star Wars, you'll be able to follow along. So in the beginning of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker is a young farmhand in some weird planet, and he runs into this strange old guy, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who says, you need to go out there and save the universe. So that was the call to action when Obi-Wan Kenobi told him to save the universe or save the galaxy. Luke Skywalker was reluctant. He said, I need to help my uncle on the farm. And Obi-Wan Kenobi shrugs his shoulders. But then there's an inciting incident. Luke's uncle and aunt are killed by Imperial stormtroopers. So that's the inciting incident. And Luke's like, let's go. And then they meet friends, Han Solo and Chewbacca, because those friends are going to help them get off the planet. Now notice, even their friends have problems. Han Solo is running from the debt he owes Jabba the Hutt, and he has to kill someone who's a bounty hunter in the bar who's after him. So every part of a story has the arc of the hero. Even small stories within a story also contain the arc of the hero. So the overall story of Star Wars is about Luke Skywalker, but Han Solo has his own arc. Obi-Wan Kenobi has his own arc. Princess Leia has her own arc. But okay, we have Luke now meeting friends and meeting enemies. Like, the people in the bar were harassing him. The stormtroopers are starting to chase him. But now the problems get greater. He's got to go to the Death Star and rescue Princess Leia with his new friends. And along the way, there's more problems. The planet Alderaan is blown up. Another problem. He has to figure out how to use the Force. They get to the Death Star. They rescue Princess Leia. You would think, that's all these great problems solved. No, now there's more problems and he meets more friends. He goes to where the revolution is and he meets all of those people. And now they have a big problem. They have to destroy the Death Star. So that's the biggest problem of all. And it's where he first encounters Darth Vader and he solves that problem. Darth Vader goes spinning off into space at the end of Star Wars. And what happens? Luke, Leia, Han Solo, and Chewbacca come back to get their awards, and we watch the tale. And then, of course, the arc of the hero continues into the other movies, but Star Wars, the movie itself, was a complete arc of the hero. It was beautifully done. Every part of the arc was in there. Let's think of another very, very classic example of the arc of the hero. So classic, in fact, that this has been literally a best-selling story for 2,500 years. So I'm talking about the story of Moses. So Moses was born Jewish at a time when Jews were the slaves of the Egyptians. Moses' mother, for whatever reason, she couldn't handle him. She put him in a basket, put him in the Nile River, and by magic, the daughter of the Pharaoh found him. And Moses, not realizing his Jewish background, grew up as a prince in the royal family. So that's the beginning. That's our hero. But what's the call to action? He starts to feel sorry for the Jewish people. They're slaves, they're being beaten, and so on. But, he's a prince. He doesn't want to ruffle any feathers. He wants to eventually be the Pharaoh. Until one day, he is so appalled by the way a slave master is treating the Jews, he beats up the slave master, kills him, mostly by accident, I guess. And because of this, he has to flee Egypt. So he doesn't want to. He wanted to be prince. He was reluctant. He flees Egypt to some other country and he runs into, guess what? A burning bush. The bush, who's God, obviously, tells him, Moses, you need to go back to Egypt and save the Jews. And Moses is once again reluctant. He says, I have a stutter. I can't do it. So God says, work with your brother Aaron. He'll speak for you. And you need to go and be the leader of the Jews and get them out of Egypt and take them to Israel. So Moses does this. He goes back to Egypt. He says to the Pharaoh, Pharaoh, you've got to release the Jews. So now he's got new friends, Aaron and the Jewish people, and he's got enemies. His previous stepfather, the Pharaoh, is now his enemy. And the Pharaoh says, no way, we're not releasing the Jewish people from slavery. God goes to Moses and Moses says, do this, 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 this. Ultimately, Moses goes back to Pharaoh 10 times with 10 different plagues. And each one is a greater and greater and more deadly plague. And each time Pharaoh still says, no way, I am not releasing the Jewish people from slavery. Finally, after the 10th plague, the killing of the firstborn children, Pharaoh says, you win, I'm releasing the Jewish people from slavery. Oh, we think the problems are solved. No, they are not. As Moses is leading the Jews away from Egypt, Pharaoh changed his mind. We have a much greater problem. The entire Egyptian army is chasing them, and in front of them is the Red Sea. They can't run anymore. So God says, don't worry, I'm going to help you out. And Moses splits the Red Sea in half, and they walk through it. The Egyptian army tries to follow, and the Red Sea collapses in and destroys the whole army. So you think this is the greatest problem, but no, there are still greater and greater problems. They go into the desert for 40 years on their trip to Israel. And along the way, Moses gets the 10 commandments. When he comes down from Mount Sinai with the 10 commandments, the Jewish people have all rebelled. They're worshiping idols. Moses is really upset. God is upset. There's greater and greater problems. And these problems continue all the way until Moses finally gets to Israel. And the final problem is Moses dies before he's able to enter Israel with the other Israelites. But the tale is told through the Bible. So this is a classic arc of the hero. It's one of the reasons why the Bible has lasted in our memories and our minds for so long. I mean, there were many religious texts written 2,500 years ago, but this text written by a small, relatively tiny group of people has withstood the test of time and survived as a story that we all tell each other generation after generation after generation. I could have done this example also with the story of Jesus or any of the stories from the Bible, which is a classic version of the arc of the hero. So that's another example. And many people, many writers use that example to define and structure their own stories. Now, note, I'm talking about structuring. I'm not yet talking about writing, but the structure of every single great story is the arc of the hero. Now, the question is, can this apply to nonfiction as well? Now, of course, many people feel the Bible is nonfiction. I won't argue with that. But let's take a more contemporary, recent story. I will tell you a story in the next example, and you tell me if it has the arc of the hero. I think if you love cars, you love the Defender. We have a Defender, and my wife, she's had a Defender in one version or other since she was 18 years old, since she started driving. And our kids even learn how to drive on a Defender. They learn how to drive on the desert in Kuwait because not only is Defender, of course, great highway driving, but you could drive it. It's great for off-roading. You could drive it on the desert. And that was the place where my kids learned how to drive a car. That's why the Defender is the vehicle that's basically adapted for the city, but also for beyond. The Defender 90 is the original two-door Defender body design. It's a smaller silhouette, but fits for journeys of all size. There's 3D surround cameras with clear sight ground view, so it lets you see underneath the vehicle and anticipate obstacles and rough terrain. Again, for the urban city and beyond. There's a next-gen Pivi Pro infotainment system, which of course is great for 3 kids driving in the back seat, and intuitive driver displays that are customizable to your journey. Explore the Defender 90 at LandRoverUSA.com.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Find yourself looking for a new job or change in career? Monster.com is here to help. We are not only here to bring you job postings, but also AI interview prep and salary tools, expert career advice, and top-notch resume services. We've got everything you need to land your perfect job fit. Discover the magic of finding the ideal job with Monster.com. Your future starts now. Visit Monster.com today. Your next job opportunity is just a click away.
Do you remember the cartoon character Oswald? Well, I don't remember it, and not many people do. But let me tell you a little story. Walt Disney, who survived the bankruptcy of his first company, it was called Laugh-O-Gram. Walt Disney started a new company called Disney. It was named after himself. And his first cartoon character was named Oswald. So in the mid-1920s, Walt Disney made 26 movies about this cartoon character called Oswald. And Universal Films was the distributor of these movies. And at one point, Walt Disney, he was making so much money, or at least Universal was making so much money, Walt Disney put his hand out and he said, I'd like a larger fee for each movie. And Universal said, no, we actually want to give you less money for each movie. And so Walt Disney was a reluctant hero at this point. He was doing well and finally had a company that was profitable, but he said, no, I am going to shut down Oswald completely. And one of the things that made him do that, he also realized that Universal owned the complete intellectual property rights to the character of Oswald. So he made a new character called Mortimer Mouse. And his wife was like, Walt, that's a horrible name. Let's call him Mickey Mouse. And so Walt, making new friends and of course new enemies, changed Mortimer Mouse to Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse went on to become a huge hit. Huge. Everybody in the country by the early 1930s knew who Mickey Mouse was. But here's the problem. Walt Disney Studios, could not make a profit, and he didn't know what to do. He was scared and he thought he was going to go bankrupt again. Here comes a new friend, Kay Kamen, who owned an advertising agency in St. Louis, Missouri. He flew all the way to LA and convinced Walt Disney, hey, how about we take Mickey Mouse and put him on a watch? Nobody had ever done something like this before. And Walt Disney was like, he's a character in movies. I'm going to put him on a watch. But Kay Kamen convinced him this would be a good thing to do. And Walt had to agree. He was on the verge of bankruptcy. So Mickey Mouse went on a watch that year, 1933, and it took off. It sold 1 million watches that year. The biggest sales for watches ever in history up until that point. And Walt Disney, instead of being the biggest movie maker in the world, Walt Disney was actually the biggest watchmaker in the world in 1933. And it was the first year that Disney would go on to make a profit. And from those profits, he was able to pour that money into his first major animated film, Snow White. And of course, went on to bigger and bigger issues and problems and starting theme parks and making even more expensive movies. But by 1957, Walt Disney himself wore the 25th millionth Mickey Mouse watch ever made. So it's a nonfiction story. It's a true story. And it's the arc of the hero. The call to action was he needed to restart his business after going bankrupt. Of course, anyone's reluctant to do that. But then there's an inciting incident, which is that Universal Pictures owned the intellectual property rights to his most successful character. So Walt Disney and his brother Roy and his wife and other people, his animator who was named Oob Eworks, they created Mortimer Mouse, who was then renamed Mickey Mouse. And the problems got bigger and bigger and bigger until finally, despite their successes and despite all the connections and network they had made, Disney was on the verge of bankruptcy right at the beginning of the Great Depression. So the greatest problem of all was, how do you solve this? So he meets new friends, Kay Kamen, who was, again, just a salesman from St. Louis. And then they teamed up with Ingersoll, which made watches, and Ingersoll itself was going out of business. They made the Mickey Mouse watch. And from this unexpected event, they went on to have the greatest of all successes. And they returned to tell the tale and to tell us many tales in our whole history of Disney. So that's an example of a nonfiction story that uses exactly the arc of the hero to get a point across, which is that often your company has to pivot, and you have to pivot in creative ways in order to succeed. And we tell that story by using the arc of the hero, the structure of the arc of the hero. Everything in life has the arc of the hero if it's a good story. And I'm not just talking about famous movies or the Bible or the story of Walt Disney or, many nonfiction books that you could think about, but even something as simple as a tweet. If you want your tweet to go viral or be more popular than your average tweet, just think about the arc of the hero. The tweet is only 240 characters, so it doesn't have to have every component. But just as an example, I looked on Twitter and I found a tweet that had 100 likes. I clicked on the person and saw that her average number of likes was 1 or 2. So this for her, she has a tweet that is viral for her. It has 100 likes versus 1 like, and it has so far 20 retweets versus 0 retweets. Here's the tweet, and then we'll figure out how it uses the arc of the hero. So her name is Crypto Mom, and she tweets, "I spent hours yesterday learning how to read a smart contract because a computer developer told me I wasn't technical enough to understand the nuances of it all. Well, thankfully, YouTube University is free. Don't let people box you in." That's her tweet. 102 likes, 20 retweets. Again, her average number of likes is 1. It's not the most viral tweet in the world, but for her, this is a big viral tweet. So what did she do? Basically, she wanted to read a smart contract. The inciting incident was somebody told her she wasn't smart enough. And so now she goes on a journey, and the developer's already an enemy. He told her she wasn't smart enough. She goes to YouTube University, which is her friend, teaches her how to read a smart contract, which presumably she does. Again, it's only a tweet, so we're not on like the whole journey of Star Wars here. And then she says, don't let people box you in. So she returns to tell the tale. The complete arc of the hero inside 260 characters, and it's 100 times as popular as her average tweet. What this means is be careful. When you're writing a tweet or you're telling a story, telling a nonfiction story, telling a fiction story, think of the structure of the arc of the hero. Now, from here, we're going to talk about the art and craft of writing. With the arc of the hero, now you know the structure of a story. This is going to be important for a nonfiction book because we're going to talk about how to write and publish in 30 days a nonfiction book. But nonfiction has the arc of the hero as well. And even a tweet has the arc of the hero. I want to tell you another great example of the arc of the hero, one that everyone is familiar with, is the romance novel. So basically in the romance novel, the couple themselves, they're the hero. So the man and the woman, they need to be together. Nobody wants to read about the man by himself or the woman by himself. People want to read about them together. So the more they're together in the romance novel, that's when they're the hero together. So initially, the man and the woman, call to action might be, oh, the man was just betrayed and his wife left him. The woman was just betrayed and her husband left her. Their friends are saying, get into a new relationship, and they're reluctant to do it. But then there's an inciting incident. The man and woman meet and there's some chemistry and they're attracted, but there are obstacles. And in every romance novel, there are both internal and external obstacles. An external obstacle might be they live far apart, or an external obstacle might be he's a musician and she swore she would never go out with another musician. So that's an example of an internal obstacle. Or maybe an internal obstacle is she doesn't like Republicans and he's a Republican. I don't know. And then the obstacles get bigger and bigger. Like maybe when they initially reject each other, they meet other people, they start dating, or there's other entanglements, or maybe one is forced to move far away. And so the obstacles get bigger and bigger. And we're always wondering, will they make it? Will they get together? Will they not make it? Will this relationship ever happen? And then finally there comes a point, the greatest obstacle of all, where the reader thinks they are never going to make it. They're on opposite sides of the world, or she thinks he betrayed her, or vice versa. And then finally they solve that, and yay, they're going to live happily ever after, which of course we know is the biggest myth of romance novels, but we love them. We love the satisfaction of it, and that's it. Now, one thing important, that's the basic arc of a romance novel, but often there are secondary arcs. So a secondary arc might be an element of another genre. Like maybe he's a vampire and the other vampires out there, this community of vampires, don't like that he's pursuing a normal human woman. So the vampires are after him while this romance story is going on. And that's a secondary arc. So, and you could have a third arc, a fourth arc, and so on. Every character in every book has their own arc. So there's multiple arcs of hero in one story. But that's a very classic example. I wanted to leave you with that one and get you thinking. But next part, we're going to begin to talk about the art and craft of being a great writer.
Are you looking for your next case? Pluto TV has all your favorite crime dramas streaming for free.
You're gonna need some backup.
Which means suspense is free.
Very cool.
Watch CSI New York, Criminal Minds, Blue Bloods, Tracker, FBI, and SWAT all for free.
You can't outrun this.
Someone is gonna pay for all this crime, but it's not gonna be you.
Take care of business, fellas.
Watch all the cases, all for free, from all your favorite devices.
We got you.
Feel the free. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.